There we Great. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight for a timely conversation about a topic we should address every year, especially as the conclusion of the calendar and tax year approaches. And that topic is savvy strategies for year-end charitable giving. I'm Amy Zox. I'm the Director of Philanthropy at the Jewish Community Foundation of Greater Mercer. We're grateful to our co-sponsors for tonight's program, the Jewish Federation of Princeton Mercer Bucks and the Jewish Federation of West Central New Jersey. And before introducing our guests, let me explain our format for tonight. We will first hear from our speakers, and then we will have a roundtable conversation that will be led by my colleague Linda Mizell, the Executive Director of the Foundation. And then we'll open up to questions from our webinar audience. So please use the chat box to enter a question at any time. And then at the conclusion of the program, we'll address as many as time permits. And finally, we're going to close with Don Leibowitz, who is a representative, a board member at the Jewish Federation of Princeton Mercer Bucks, who will deliver closing remarks. So now I'm so honored to introduce my colleagues, Lottie and Josh. Lottie Nilsen is Vice President of the Jacobson Jewish Community Foundation at the Jewish Federation of South Palm Beach County and Boca Raton, Florida. She's responsible for the overall management of the foundation, and I loved Lottie's quote on LinkedIn where she's committed to helping people discover, unlock, and reveal the treasures in their lives that will impact the world. And Josh Stein is the Executive Director at the Jewish Community Foundation of Greater Kansas City. And I just discovered, Josh, that you were recently named one of Kansas City Business Journal's 20 to Know in nonprofits, a list that recognizes extraordinary leaders in the Kansas City nonprofit community. So that's a great list to be on. The reason why we invited both Josh and Lottie is not only are they executives at their respective foundations, but they both are credentialed as chartered advisors in philanthropy, which explains the CAP that comes after their names. And this makes them true experts on tonight's topic and why we're so grateful that they've joined us. So Lottie's going to kick things off, and then Josh will follow her, and then we'll move into the questions. So Lottie, thank you.
Thank you. So happy to be here with all of you this evening. And it's really an honor to be asked to join your session this evening. So and thank you for sharing that quote from my LinkedIn. That was a nice surprise. I wanted to mention that was something in my previous lifetime. I was a journalist. And what I have found is that I made that commitment about helping people discover the gifts that they want to share with the world as a storyteller. But what I have found since I've been in Jewish philanthropy is that I am very much helping people tell their stories and literally share their gifts with the world in a very different way. So thank you for letting me be here. And as we talk about end of year, there's so many different options. And I'm sure that some of these things you've thought about or talked about before. And I'm sure many of you who are here, this is how you practice. But the number one most basic way is by writing a check. Because great things happen, and you may receive a federal income tax charitable deduction. If you itemize, you can write off the amount you're donating. It sort of goes without saying. And by the way, if you hear the barking in the background, I apologize. Apparently my dog has something to say on this topic. And of course, as you know, the most basic things, your envelope has to be postmarked by the U.S. Postal Service on or before December 31st for your donation to qualify. And so I'm starting off with that very, very basic. One of the things that we learned in our CAP class is that your check has to be postmarked by December 31st through the US Postal Service. But if you were to use, say, UPS or FedEx, it would have to arrive by December 31st. And it's such an interesting distinction, and it has to do with how the IRS talks about how you can accept gifts. And because the USPS, it's in somebody else's control, as long as it's postmarked, it counts. For one of those private carriers, you have to receive it by December 31st. So I thought I would mention that small difference. Another very simple way, and I know that Josh will talk about this a little bit in different ways, but appreciated securities. When you donate appreciated securities that you have owned for longer than 1 year, you receive the same income tax savings as you would by making a gift of cash. And you also eliminate any tax on the appreciation. As far as deadlines, if the securities are electronically transferred to the charity of your choice, the gift date is the day the securities enter their account, not the day you ask your broker to make the transfer. So that's just one of those important details to keep in mind. We'll talk more later about contributing to your donor advised fund, because there's so much to say on that topic. But when you add funds to an existing donor advised fund, or you open a new one by a written agreement, either at a community foundation or another sponsoring organization, you are making a great way. That's one great way to make year-end gifts. You qualify for an income tax deduction when you make the gift to the donor advised fund without immediately having to choose the organizations you want to support. And if you're ready to start making an impact with your donor advised fund, you can recommend a grant. It's called recommending, as opposed to because once you give the funds to the sponsoring organization, they are technically the assets of that organization, but they are held in an account with your name, and you're able to make recommendations. And you can either do it one at a time, or you can make recurring grants. Here and the Jewish Federation of South Palm Beach County, we have quite a few donors who want to make like recurring gifts of $1,000, $2,000 every, whether it's every month or every quarter, to different organizations. And that's just a way for them to spread out their support. And if you only qualify for a tax deduction when you contribute to your fund, not when you recommend the grant. So you get to see your gift help a cause you care about when you recommend the grant, but you're able to use those tax deductions at any time. And another possibility, I know that once again, Josh will be talking about some of this from a different perspective. Making a gift from your IRA is such an incredible way for you to make annual gifts to the organizations that you care about. It's also an incredible way for you to establish your endowments, or those gifts in perpetuity that you can establish in your lifetime. So if you are 70 and a half or older, you can give any amount up to $105,000 from your IRA directly to the philanthropy that you care about. And this amount will be higher in subsequent years to adjust for inflation. It just recently went from 100,000 to 105,000. You will not pay income tax on the transfer. And if you're required to take a minimum distribution, the RMD, you can use your gift to satisfy all or part of your obligations to organizations. Your IRA administrator has to remove the funds from your account by December 31st for your donation to qualify for this year. And if you have check writing features on your IRA, your check must clear your account by December 31st to count toward your required minimum distribution for the calendar year. So those are just some of the details. One other thing that I wanted to mention, and then I'm going to toss it over to Josh, is the idea of bunching your gifts. When you bunch your charitable gifts, you can magnify the tax benefits. You can combine your strategies with 2 or more years. You can give a significantly more money and have that set aside by, for example, your federation, and you can say, here's 25,000 and I want 12 and a half for this year and 12 and a half for next year. And the advantage of that is that you can use it for anticipated planned giving, and you can also itemize those deductions if it's within the itemization. So only taxpayers who itemize their deductions get a tax benefit from a charitable gift. And by bunching, you can put it in your donor advised fund. You don't have to just do it to your federation. That's one of the great things about a donor advised fund, is that you can put a significant amount in this year and spread it out over the coming years, how you want to spend that. So we'll talk more about that. One of the things about donor advised funds that Josh and I were talking about this earlier, this year it was a really nice surprise with my own donor advised fund that we had a good year in the market. And as I'm approaching year end, I know that I had those recommendations. I had the things that I had to, things that I had to recommend, like my annual gift to my federation and some other organizations. But because I had my money in my donor advised fund, it grew, and I was able to make some really fun, meaningful, impactful gifts at the end of the year that I didn't expect that I was going to be able to make. And it was so fun to be able to make those organizations happy and know that that was something I don't know that I would have been able to do if I hadn't invested that money in philanthropy ahead of time. So that's it for me for now, and we'll be back. Josh.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much, Lottie, and thanks for having me, everyone. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about something that is near and dear to all of our hearts, philanthropy, and our opportunity to make an impact with the money that we have and the opportunities that we have to kind of envision the world in the way that we want to see it through our philanthropy. So it's the perfect time of year. It's hard to believe as we look at our calendars that just this week we'll roll over to November, which, for whatever reason, well, I guess not for whatever reason, it's no surprise that November, December, just aligned with our secular calendar, really becomes the season of giving. And it's the time of year when the vast majority of charitable gifts are made in this country, and when people oftentimes sit down to evaluate what they want to do to support the causes that they care about. And, it's also a great time to do just general planning around your philanthropy. And so a lot of times, because it's the end of the year and we're busy and everything, it becomes a challenge. But I encourage everybody to sit back, take the time, if you have it, to really assess what it is that you're doing, what impact do you really want to make, and to analyze whether or not you're accomplishing what you want to do with your philanthropy. Nobody's forcing you to make these gifts, and because of that, you have a real opportunity to be really thoughtful about what you're doing. One exercise that I've talked to our donors about at different times, and some people have gotten back to me and they've said that they've done it and that it's been helpful, is to kind of think about your charitable priorities. If you were to make a pie chart of all of the different things that you care about, break them into, either larger sections or very specific sections. So, it may be the abatement of hunger within our society, or supporting Jewish education, combating anti-Semitism is a big one in today's day and age, unfortunately. And so make a pie chart kind of with the relative values of what you would want to do for each one of those causes, and then do an overlay of your actual charitable giving, say from this past year, and take a look. Does your charitable giving actually match your personal values and priorities? For many of us, we kind of habitually give to things over time. We accumulate charities because somebody asked us to give at one point. And it's not to diminish any particular charity or another. There are incredible causes to give to. Of course, the Federation has the opportunity. I've actually worked at Federation for much of my career, has the opportunity to cover many of these causes that you care most deeply about with a singular gift. That's the beauty of federated giving. But outside of that, do your gifts really align with what you would want to accomplish if you were starting over from today? I'm not saying to make rash decisions about starting from a clean slate and not giving to things that you've given for 25 years. But you may want to realign your relative amounts that you give to organizations to make sure that it really aligns with your values, because that gets into the next thing that something when I have been in this role longer and longer, I feel that oftentimes gets missed is the joy of giving, the opportunity that we each have to really look at the impact that we're making and to consider how good we should feel when we're making these charitable gifts. And oftentimes what gets lost in the process is the sense of, obligations. Great. It's a Jewish value that we're obligated. It's our responsibility to give tzedakah. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that it should feel perfunctory, that it should feel like something that we're just, that we have to do. We can still feel really good about it, and it doesn't necessarily mandate where we give or how we give and all of that. And so we have the opportunity to really assess what it is that makes us feel good and what drives us, what motivates us, what makes us recognize the impact that we want to make. And so, just some things to think about towards year end. And now, as far as a couple of specific strategies, one is to use this time, Lottie mentioned, with the stock market at the levels that it's been at, you have the opportunity to take some of the appreciation that you have outside of what you've already donated and to use that to, whether it's to establish a donor advised fund, it's a great opportunity to lock in those gains for future charitable giving. One opportunity in particular is for some people who may be getting near their retirement years. We're seeing a lot of our donors who are at that point, they're still in their higher income earning years, their higher taxable income earning years, and they want to offset some of that tax, and they want to be able to alleviate some of the expenses that they'll have during their retirement years. So you have the opportunity to use that as a time. Lottie mentioned bunching, which is a great tandem to this strategy, to really put more and more into your donor advised funds that will enable you to give throughout your retirement years without necessarily needing to have that stressor in terms of where the funds are going to come from and which assets and all of that. So it provides you an opportunity to be kind of more mindful, more planful about the approach that you take. And you get the deduction now in order to do so. And then you have the funds set aside that can be used for future years. One of the things that I'd recommend when people do decide to really inflate the value of their donor advised fund as a charitable vehicle for future years is to pay particular attention to successorship and what you want to do if you're no longer there. A lot of times people establish a donor advised fund with a relatively modest amount of money. You may not be thinking about it in terms of, how is this going to impact the giving of successors? Am I going to use it to support the charities that I cared about or that my children may care about? And it gives you a chance to really contemplate that. But I would strongly encourage you to put some real thought into that and to work with the staff at the foundation if you're working with the donor advised fund there to really create a plan that works for you. The other thing is pre-funding IRAs for future, pre-funding donor advised funds for future giving is a great strategy. Another strategy that Lottie alluded to is using your IRA. And just to talk about one specific way that people can do that, certainly as Lottie mentioned, you can use your IRA for directed gifts to support charities that you want to support, whether that be the Federation or any particular cause. Some will give you a checkbook. Most will make regular distributions upon your request. But one of the things that you can also do, as you'll if you don't already know, you will come to know, you're not allowed to put funds from your IRA with a required minimum distribution into a donor advised fund. It's an unfortunate little wrinkle that would be the most helpful to people. And yet the idea is to get the money out there into the community quicker. I think that that was the rationale between why the legislation was made the way that it is. But really, the opportunity that you might have is to pre-fund or to create a restricted fund at the Jewish Community Foundation, where you can then set priorities for what's going to happen to these funds in future years. It's something, we call it turning on the spigot. I'm sure there's a more technical term, but you have the opportunity to say, okay, well, I'm going to put in money from my required minimum distribution. It may be more than I wanted to give to the causes that I support in any one given year. But I'm going to use this to fund a restricted fund. It may be for a Lion of Judah endowment. It may be for a annual support of my synagogue. And I established this fund, and I have the opportunity to either say, okay, well, I'm going to turn on the spigot, so to speak, to start the flow of those funds annually starting now, or I could say that I'm going to effectively pre-fund what might have otherwise come in the form of a legacy gift. The benefits are, as Lottie mentioned, when you use your IRA today, you avoid paying tax on that money. So for a lot of people that don't need the income for their lifestyle, they want to use it for charitable purposes, but they may not want to give it all in that year. You have the opportunity to grow this resource that will continue to support the community for many years. In fact, it can effectively grow to be a real legacy gift from you and your family to support the community and causes that you care deeply about. And it gives you a lot of opportunity both to recognize the tax benefit today, but also to have that sense of the joy of giving again. When you give it during your lifetime, even if you plan to give something from your estate, that's wonderful. And most legacy gifts still come in the form of a bequest. But when you give it today, you see that asset continue to grow, hopefully through the prudent investment once it's at the Jewish Community Foundation. And it will enable you to support those causes and to make those plans for causes down the road. So, use this time as a chance of reflecting on your giving. The other thing just the last thing I'd mention on this, a lot of times people think that some of these strategies are for people that have only the most substantial means. And just like annual giving is a opportunity for everybody to give what they can, when they can. These strategies hold true when it comes to legacy giving, when it comes to planning. Everybody, you should take the same thought regardless, because your gift is important to you. It's reflective of your capacity to be able to make the impact that you want to make. And the last thing is just the opportunity to, when you establish these funds, to engage your family around the process. We continually hear that there's no time too early to start engaging your children, and yet there's also no time when it's too late. The only time it's too late is after you're gone and your children are sitting there wondering what you really cared about. Why did you give in the manner that you did? Why was it so important? And so the opportunity to engage your families, and federations and foundations are incredible resources to help you facilitate those family conversations that I think will make you feel, your whole family feel very good about the fact that you've done so and the fact that you've really put in that thought. So with that, I'll conclude, and then we'll have the opportunity. We'll all look forward to a conversation now, a roundtable conversation with Linda, who will join us and facilitate the questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Lottie and Josh. Lots of information for us to think about. For the participants in the webinar, please post your questions in the chat, and we will try to get to them. If we don't answer all the questions, please know that you can always reach out to Amy and myself. So our first question is, not all financial advisors are very familiar with some of the strategies you have mentioned here regarding IRAs, RMDs, and QCDs. When you're having this conversation with your financial advisor, how do you suggest as an individual we raise these issues. Josh, you want to
Sure.
start?
Yeah, I'll start. Well, one of the opportunities, Lottie and I were, as mentioned, we're in the CAPS course together. And it was a wonderful opportunity to really delve into this particular issue, maybe more than any other, about how nonprofit professionals, how fundraisers can work together with donors and their own professional advisors to really facilitate the most meaningful gifts in the best method, using the best vehicles and strategies for that particular donor. And so I think that I encourage, again, and this isn't something, many people have, family meetings or a family office if they get to a certain level of wealth, but really for anybody that uses a financial advisor or uses a stockbroker, an attorney to help them with their estate plans, the more that there's a engagement. I mean, I can't tell you what's more frustrating than receiving a gift that a donor established alongside in conversation with their attorney in the process of their will or trust planning. It comes to us and we're not able to accept the gift because it's not something we can facilitate, or it's something that it's not how we would have structured it. And we might have been able to give a piece of advice or to help to facilitate a more meaningful gift or done it in a different way, at least to have that conversation, that dialogue. But I think that we all have the opportunity to kind of, I guess you could say, manage up with our own financial advisors and professionals. Sometimes they don't engage in the conversations about philanthropy at all. Make sure to tell them that you care about philanthropy and that it's something that's important to you, and that you want them to be mindful of how the decisions you make will better facilitate you to be able to make charitable gifts to causes that you care about. And so sometimes there's a questionnaire when you first start off your relationship with a financial advisor. It may be when you're just getting started in your career and you may not really have the assets. So you mark off that, charitable giving isn't the major thing that's of importance. Well, you may be with that advisor. If they do a good job, they're helping you accumulate and grow your resources. And because you haven't started off talking about charitable giving, it's not something that ever really raises, something you talk about. So those are my thoughts on that topic, but I'm sure, Lottie, you may have some others.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lottie.
I wanted to say first, I know we have some questions in the, some questions that have come in, so we'll get to those. I just want to be sure that you all know we see them. We'll be getting to those soon. I think sometimes one of the things that I learned during our preparation for the CAP course was just how we as philanthropic professionals have a seat at the table. And sometimes Josh just made a great point about you may not where you started when you started a relationship, or maybe you're starting a new relationship with, it doesn't just have to be a financial advisor. It can be your estate planning attorney. It can be your CPA. It can be your life insurance advisor, and it could be a financial advisor. But I think where we, as your philanthropic partners, whether it's through the Jewish Community Foundation of Greater Mercer or your federation, there are some opportunities for us to help you identify your key goals. And you can start by, when you're meeting with your professionals, your estate planning professionals, you can start by explaining your philanthropic intentions, which we're happy, that's what we love to do, is help you identify what those intentions might be. We can help you identify those causes that you want to support, and sort of help you plant the seed so that when you have the conversations with your estate planning professionals, you can be clear on your goals, and they can help, it'll align those strategies with both your financial and charitable objectives. And I think that's one of the things that I really love about having that seat at the table, and knowing that I'm not the expert on your taxes, and I don't know how the decisions you make are necessarily going to impact your bottom line, but I'm here to help you identify and bring to fruition your goals in philanthropy. I think you can also, you can suggest some of those things that maybe they're not thinking of, the qualified charitable distribution. And by the way, Pamela asked a question. Please clarify your comment about not being able to use your RMD to contribute to a donor advised fund. You cannot, it's the IRS rule that you cannot have money that goes directly from your IRA to your donor advised fund. And as Josh mentioned, that is because they want the IRS wants that money to be put into use. So they don't want you to save it for later. But as a great recommendation, Josh mentioned having a designated fund or a restricted fund. And we have many donors in South Palm Beach County who will fund something like their Lion of Judah endowment or their annual campaign endowment with their RMD. And we just put that into a perpetual fund or a restricted fund, but it can't go into a donor advised fund. So that is true. And Pamela, please let us know if that answered your question. But just really quickly, two other things that I wanted to mention. You can always look at your beneficiary designations. That's one of the things that I would highly recommend when you're working with your estate planning professionals. Ask your advisor about how designating a charity as a beneficiary might affect your estate and tax implications, and how that might be a better gift than, say, your IRA, which is highly taxed. Sometimes you can, if you have a life insurance policy, that might be a possibility. And that's very different. You know, the tax implications are very different than if you were to, say, leave your IRA or other assets to your children. And review the potential tax benefits on your income, since not all advisors are deeply familiar with tax advantage charitable giving strategies. You can bring specific questions to your meetings with them about the tax implications, such as could leveraging a qualified charitable distribution reduce my adjusted gross income and keep me in a lower tax bracket? So sometimes, you know, we can help you identify those. We don't necessarily have the answers, but we can have those conversations with you to help you identify those things. And ask for us to be a part of the collaborative approach is always very helpful. We, in South Palm Beach County, we work with a lot of, we have a professional advisory committee. We work very closely and build strong relationships. And I think a lot of philanthropy, organizations like to have that collaborative approach.
Thank you both. So I just want to say that on a local level, the Jewish Community Foundation team has worked with families both to use the RMD to set up restricted funds, which fund gifts to congregations, gifts to the Jewish Family Service, the Federation, you know, permanent gifts, as well as we encourage people to think if they want to make a legacy gift and they're part of the Life and Legacy program, you can use your RMD to make your legacy gift. So essentially making your tomorrow gift today. And we have a number of people who have done that because they feel they want to use their RMD in a charitable way. And this makes sense for them. They're essentially pre-funding their legacy promise realization. So there just are two other ways that we see individuals using their RMD. And thank you for talking about how important it is to have a charitable advisor at the table. Because again, I think that everyone has their book of knowledge. And the tax advisor and the financial planner have one book of knowledge, but we, the charitable professionals, have a different book of knowledge and can bring that important information to the table. So the next question is, what do you think is a particular advantage in today's world to having a donor advised fund at a Jewish institution like the Jewish Community Foundation versus any other financial institutions? It's a topic that we've seen a lot of conversation about. given the current climate?
Josh, you want to start?
Yeah, Lottie, why
I'll-
don't you start this time?
Okay,
Go ahead.
great. I will tell you, I think donor advised funds are, I know we'll be talking a little bit more about trends. I think that having a donor advised fund with a Jewish organization is one of the most important statements that you can make about how you support a community in different ways. Our donor advised funds, and when you put your donor advised fund at one of the big financial houses, for example, Schwab or Fidelity or Raymond James, they're all great. And I'm not, they have amazing technology and you can log in, make a click, you can see a pie chart, you can see all kinds of things, which isn't, as common with a Jewish organization but there's something to be said for, there's somebody at this Jewish organization who knows you, that we know who you are. When you call us, I'm able to have a conversation that's meaningful. You're not, and you can log in. You can use a donor portal, but there's also somebody who really cares about you. And there's this, we do have management fees that we are like where we are. It's the same as any of those big places. We're on par with Schwab or Fidelity. And so those management fees aren't, when you have a donor advised fund at a Jewish organization, you're supporting the Jewish community. That is going to help our bottom line, make us a stronger organization. I mentioned the person who knows you. If you don't have a succession plan, or depending on your succession plan, if you leave your assets, if you're gone and you haven't made other arrangements for those assets in your donor advised fund, if they're at a Jewish organization, they're going to continue to support the Jewish community forever, as opposed to just going into the coffers of a big financial organization. And finally, the last thing I will mention is that I had an experience about 6-7 months ago that made me even more of a proponent of holding your philanthropic funds with a Jewish organization. I received a letter that there was a donor who wanted to move their funds from Fidelity to our organization, and they needed some clarifying questions. And one of the questions, I called them and I had it, I'm so glad I had, I wrote down all of these things because it was the most upsetting phone call I've ever had in my career. They asked me all these questions. How is the money going to be used? Is any of it going to be sent to, is it going to outside of the country? And I said, my answer was, we do support Jews in Israel and in other countries around the world, but we do not send money directly. It has to go through an American affiliate. And then at the end, this person from Fidelity asked me, will any of this money go to Cuba, Venezuela, North Korea, Iran, Israel? And I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. And when it was very inappropriate. As it turned out, there was a person on our board who followed up, and the person who asked me that question was not supposed to ask that question. But the fact that I was asked if money going to Israel in the same group as Iran, Russia, Venezuela, it was very, very disheartening. And it made me think, my donors are never going to have somebody ask them those questions. They are going to know, whether they're here or not, that we are caring for Jews.
Yeah.
Josh?
All good perspectives. I mean, I think just to elaborate, I think that one of the things that our donors have found, especially in this post-October 7th environment, where we're all thinking about how all of our actions are going to hopefully reduce anti-Semitism and to increase the the positivity of which we're viewed as Jewish members of the broader community, is that all of the checks that go out from the your donor advised fund at the Jewish Community Foundation do it with the Jewish Community Foundation logo on it. And I think that that says a lot, whether it goes to the art museum or historical museum or any cause that it goes to. I think just you almost get an additional benefit in that it says, you get the benefit personally, or not the benefit, but the recognition personally. They know that the gift came from you, the grant came from you. But I think it shows that you're part of the collective Jewish community and support of those institutions. So I think there's some value in that, as well as just the fee. You're going to pay fees somewhere when you have a donor advised fund. And I always feel like the fee is going back to support the programs and services and the efforts of the Jewish Community Foundation are going to have a lot more leverage within those things that you care about. And one of those things is also, that we do that with our fees under management, and I know that that is the same as here with the Jewish Community Foundation, is kind of what I would call philanthropic advisory services. At no additional cost to having your donor advised fund under their management, you have access to professionals who, like Lottie said, know what you care about. You have the opportunity to talk to them and to really help. They're there to help you define what those causes are, to look at the impacts and the outcomes of the gifts that you're making, to help you feel even better about your giving. I talked about engaging your children with family philanthropy. So there's a lot of additional advisory services and benefits that you can glean from working with people who really care about you and what you want to accomplish. And then, back to that personal service, I think you can't say enough. One of the lessons that I share often, if you are with Schwab or Fidelity and every year you give $1,000 to a cause that you care about, and then one year you type in $10,000, assuming that you have that much in your donor advised fund, $10,000 is going out, no questions asked. We occasionally, because we know you, because we know we're small enough that we're not just, you're not just another client with an ID number, and we're going to see that, and we're going to maybe shoot you an email or give a phone call and say, just wanted to make sure. I know you give $1,000 every year. Perhaps there's something special you're doing, which is totally fine. But catching some of those things, or I think having that relationship and being able to provide that personal service is really invaluable.
Thank you both. I think that the personal relationship, and also, as Josh just put, the paying attention. We know our donor advised fund holders' patterns of giving. And so we are able to ask a question if there's something going on. And we had a donor where it wasn't that they typed in the wrong information, but was beginning stages of dementia. And we entered into conversations with his successor, advisor, his daughter. And so those are the kinds of personal things that I think do happen at Jewish community foundations. I also want to say here locally that our fees support our life and legacy program and support the staff that are providing the coaching in terms of legacy giving. So the next question is, what are some of the trends that you see happening in the next, let's do 5 years, with philanthropy, as it kind of, here's your crystal ball, about savvy strategies. If people want to plan ahead 5 years, what do you see as you follow what's coming down in terms of legislation or other kinds of government, or even just the general financial world?
Yeah, well, I'll jump in. There's always talk about legislation that will affect how, some of it's in the weeds of how we administer our donor advised fund program. Some of it will have a direct impact on our donors. I don't think that there's anything. One is it's impossible to predict. I think the ideas are thrown around. We talked a lot about how IRAs RMDs can't be used to go into a donor advised fund. Well, somebody at some point thought that we're doing the best thing to get money out there into the community right away. At the same time, you can put that money into an endowment that will then perpetuate it, where it's being metered over time. I think that a lot of people think that they have great ideas, but don't really understand the industry. One of the nice things that I've come to find out over the years that I've been in this role is how much the Jewish Federations of North America, and which is the umbrella organization of all the Jewish federations, really advocates on our behalf in order to make sure that our charitable priorities and those of our Jewish community, both the federations and Jewish community foundations that serve our community, are represented, and that people understand why people give and why they should get the tax benefits for giving and how they stimulate giving and all of those things. Gosh, I always say that my crystal ball is pretty hazy. It's hard to really know. One of the things that I mentioned is that a lot more people are using their IRAs to fund future gifts, and I think that that's something that will increase over time as people's IRAs are growing, with the markets growing, and IRAs haven't been such a huge part of people's portfolios until this coming era that we're in, where now we see a lot of people that have really sizable IRAs that are looking at them as an opportunity for charitable benefit. And as Lottie mentioned, these are also vehicles that are the most challenging when you give them to your heirs and pass them along, because they are highly taxable. So being a little more strategic in that way. I think it's hard to know. I mean, the big unknown is what's going to happen with the estate tax. That's scheduled, I think, in 2026 to be reset. With the estate tax at today's levels, $27, $28 million per couple, it's just impacting so few people, and it's really changed people's strategies as a result. And yet again, another great reason why people are choosing to give during their lifetimes, to at least recognize some benefit, especially if you feel comfortable to part with the assets during your lifetime. But all bets are off. If those levels come way back down, there's going to be the attorneys will stand to benefit most largely, because everybody will be back making appointments to revisit their estate tax planning. And a lot more calls will be coming to Jewish community foundations then about how to defer gifts that will help to offset their potential estate tax liabilities. So it's hard to know exactly what's coming down the pike. I think the most important thing is to continually be in conversation with your advisors, with your professionals at the Jewish Community Foundation, to really better understand how these changes may come to be and how they're going to impact your giving.
So I have a few ideas about some of the trends that we may see, but I also want to take just a moment. Sari had asked a question: are there guidelines on the amount of money you can put into your DAF? And this is a great segue into trends. There is it depends on your organization. I don't know of any Jewish organization that puts a cap on the amount of money that you put into your donor advised fund. We are not held to the same, we don't have this responsibility as like a private family foundation to spend up to 5% each year. So you can do it more, you can do it less. We do like to see money going out because we don't want to be the target of the IRS, but there is not a cap. However, many organizations, we may all have different minimums. For example, it's a $5,000 minimum where I am, and it may be different where you are, where Josh is, where Linda is. And so it's just up to, you can ask your organization what their minimum is. But I would say that this tremendous transfer of wealth, as our baby boomers are aging, we've seen statistics as much as $84 trillion in transfer of wealth from baby boomers to the next generations, whether it's Gen X, millennials, Gen Z. That is going to be a trend that is going to really shape and impact the philanthropic world. And I think it'll be really interesting to see. I think donor advised funds, the expansion of donor advised funds is going to be very big, because as that transfer of wealth happens, donor advised funds are a great way for one generation to work with the next, to demonstrate their values, to stipulate what their money is going to go to even after their lifetime, but also to leave money for younger generations to make decisions about philanthropy. But for a variety of reasons, that money stays in philanthropic pools. I think we will see an increase in complex gift structures, just because there's this tremendous transfer of wealth, things like charitable remainder trusts and charitable lead trusts. I know I've seen a little bit of that, but I think there's a lot more to come. Another trend that I really think we're going to see is more people who are looking for ESG investing, the environmental, social, and governance, where they want to invest with their values and they want to be sure that the options that we provide as a philanthropy are options that align with their values. So I think we're going to see more of that. I have gotten more questions about that. The rise of AI is going to impact, donor transparency, and increased digitization is really going to be, we'll see what happens, but AI definitely is going to make a difference. Exactly how, I'm not sure yet, but it is a topic that a lot of people are talking about. And then of course, we have the, policy driven, whether, Josh talked about how what's going to happen after 2026 with, tax policy. So we'll see what happens. And we anticipate we'll see some changes that will come, but we'll have to address those when they happen. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you both. I just want to say that at the Jewish Community Foundation, our minimum is $6,000 to open up a donor advised fund. I am, fascinated by what you've talked about in terms of the trends. I think it basically says that we all need to be watching. But I have one very specific question. If you're able to itemize deductions, is it better to make a charitable gift and include it in your deductions, or to make that charitable gift through your RMD?
I would say your RMD, your donor advised fund provides the flexibility, as opposed to, it really is personal preference. Like, do you want to put all your eggs in one basket? Because that's where your priority is. More power to you. Your donor advised fund is an excellent way. Well, you can't use your required minimum distribution to contribute to a donor advised fund. So that's out of the question. You can't. Oh, was that right?
Yeah.
So the question is, if you're itemizing your deductions, do you make a charitable gift? But isn't there a minimum, isn't there a threshold of the amount of money you need to give to charity to really have that charitable gift? Josh, you're nodding, so maybe.
Well, right now, we're seeing more and more with the tax code as it is, that it's hard to get to that itemization threshold, just because the state and local taxes are capped at $10,000.
Right.
And then, depending on where you are, mortgage interest, and then you get to charitable giving. So that's really where that bunching comes in. If you give multiple years worth of giving in the same year, you push yourself over that threshold. So that's the good strategy. If you are if you're not itemizing, then it becomes an easy question that I would recommend using your IRA. It's just a great vehicle. And I say that as somebody who, I'm with the Jewish Community Foundation, and I love to be a part of that flow of philanthropy from our donors, and yet I want to be respectful of the donors, and the donor should give in the way that makes the most financial tax-wise sense for them. But if you're itemizing anyway, and you have an IRA that you have an RMD to use, like Lottie said, it's personal preference. The only thing that I'd say is, let's say that you're going to give appreciated stock to increase your itemization, that deduction that year. That if you're thinking about tax planning and eventually bequeathing those assets to the next generation, to somebody else, I definitely would use the RMD, use your IRA to support your charitable giving, just because if, as a matter of inheritance, there will be a highly taxed asset where stock gets the stepped up basis, and whoever would inherit that would do so at the value that they inherited without having any tax liability. And so, yeah, it's tricky. There's not a right or wrong way. And the other thing I'd say is that, I'm not a tax professional. I always tell our donors this. Again, best reason to bounce strategies off of the people at the foundations, but ultimately to go to your CPAs, to go to your professional advisors. They know your situation the best. And even if I know the right answer 99% of the time, you may have a nuance that I don't know about, and I would hate to give anybody that advice.
And one thing I will also say is that a donor advised fund is a great home for appreciated stock.
Yeah.
If you have as the market has been very strong, a way to if you donate appreciated stock to your donor advised fund, which is, transferred to your donor advised fund, then you're able to take that as a donation, and it definitely has some significant tax benefits.
Absolutely. And this time of year, we see a tremendous increase. And, when we receive donor advised fund, we receive appreciated stock. One thing I would mention as a technical aside is be sure that you let your philanthropy know exactly what it is that you're sending and when it has been sent and who it's from, because for privacy reasons, we don't know who stock has come from. So I would just mention that you want to be sure, if you're going to donate appreciated stock, that you give your organization a heads up that you're sending X number of shares of Apple or Nvidia or whatever it is, because that's what has appreciated and you're going to have to pay capital gains. You definitely want to be sure that we know, so that we know where to put it.
Yes, absolutely. And we actually send out an end of year checklist to all of our fund holders, reminding them that if they are transferring stock, to please let us know. Well, thank you both for really some incredible conversation, as well as a lot of things to think about. I'd like to introduce Don Leibowitz, who will now close the program. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this evening. I'm Don Leibowitz. I'm past president of the Jewish Federation of Princeton, Mercer, Bucks, and delighted to have so many people join us for this really, really informative program. Thank you to the Jewish Community Foundation for hosting this evening. And of course, thank you so much, Lottie and Josh, for your insights and your time and expertise this evening. I know I learned a lot. I'm sure everybody else did as well. Just a quick note. First, there's a recording of this program that'll be made available to everybody through the Jewish Community Foundation website afterwards. So if there are those in your organizations who you think can benefit from this, please make them aware of that too. And just a quick note about some upcoming programs. Please join us on November 13th at 7 p.m. for another community program that the foundation is sponsoring. It's called GI Jews, How World War II Changed a Generation. It features a really distinguished professor and author, Deborah Dashmore from the University of Michigan. And join us also on December 9th at 7 for a program which will be led by our very own Linda Meisel, called Legacy Letters, Creating Your Own Ethical Will. Please stay abreast of the work of the Federation and all of the philanthropic resources of our Jewish community and the Jewish Community Foundation. visit our respective websites. Please reach out to the professionals at each of those organizations, of course, with any questions that you may have. And we hope to see you again soon. Thank you again, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.